Trump administration's policy, which is now resulting in child internment camps. That's what I said, child internment camps. We all should be able to agree that in the United States of America, we will not intentionally separate children from their parents. We will not do that. We are better than that. We are so much better. We should be able to agree that we will not keep kids in child internment camps indefinitely and hidden away from public view. What country is that? This is the United States of America.
That was ranking member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee during a hearing on the Inspector General's report on the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And Congressman Elijah Cummings of Maryland joins us now. Thank you so much for being on this morning. It is great to see you.
It's good to be here.
Great to hear your voice yesterday and what you said. Tell us what's going on Capitol Hill.
I think
are you being heard?
Go ahead, Mika. I think we are being heard, but we certainly are being ignored. I think basically what President Trump has done is he's decided that he is going to ram this policy, and by the way, it is his policy, down the throats of the American people. And basically what he'll do is a term that I often use, he'll rope-a-dope until people get tired and they won't talk about it anymore, and then he will have his way. But this is, we're going down a slippery slope, Mika. The question is where does all of this end? When you've got toddlers sitting around in a room crying for their mother or their dad, and you've got tent cities being built, by the way, which are extremely expensive, and there are people benefiting from this, corporations, nonprofits benefiting big time, and children literally being used as hostages, really, so that President Trump can have his way.
Yeah.
And I would appeal to the president. Let me just say this to the president. Mr. President, when I met with you a year or so ago, I did say that you could be a great president. But I also said that you could be a great president only if you represented all the people, only if you lifted up all of their lives and made their lives better. This does not make their lives better, nor does it make our country better. Because what is happening now is these children, I mean, think about it, Mika. These children will grow up, many of them, angry at the United States of America. I tell my staff that most of the problems that we deal with in my office started when people were little children. And so the pediatricians, they will tell you the damage that are being done to these children, all we're doing is creating a horrible situation. You cannot separate kids from their parents, period.
So I'm wondering what you would say to members of the media who are supportive of this policy, who say things like this, and they believe it, and they want people to know. These kids have clean, nice facility, they have recreation, they have tutoring, they're treated as well as we can under the circumstances, and they have entertainment as well.
I would say to them, they need to talk to child psychiatrists like I have, and talk to pediatricians who will tell you that this is very, very traumatic for children, big time. But more significantly, children need their parents. They need them. I mean, I would ask them to look into the eyes of their own children and imagine somebody coming and snatching their child away from them. They would go through all kinds of conniptions trying to make sure that they got their child back. Now Mika, understand something that's very significant here. 18 members of the House has asked Trey Gowdy, our chairman of our Oversight Committee, to help us get more information about what is going on with these children. In other words, questions like the ones that you all have been posing this morning. If a child is taken away, how do we track the child to the parent? How long will this last? Where are our children? What is this costing? Why are taxpayer dollars being used to do something that most Americans would find just obnoxious?
Right.
And so again, what I would say to them is, since the Attorney General likes to quote the Bible,
Yeah.
do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Come on now.
Well, I think
And
the children are given numbers, like criminals, I guess. But the one thing I'll ask as a follow-up, and then Willie's going to jump in. The administration has also described these cages as walls made of wires, and also members of the media have been pushing that forward, that we're exaggerating with these parallels of concentration camps. And that we're exaggerating, that these walls are just made of wires.
Well, I would say, why are you hiding them? Why are you hiding them from the press? Why do we have correspondents going all the way down there, having to stand outside of facilities, unable to get in? That says something. Let me tell you something. I said when President Trump was elected, this is a fight for the soul of our democracy. And I'm telling you, these kinds of actions just cut away at the very fabric of our democracy. We go all around the world spending billions of dollars trying to tell people how to run their lives and to be democratic. And now look at us. We are no longer the shining example of what is right. And so, again, I would appeal to the president. Listen to your wife, listen to your daughter, listen to us. And you, Mr. President, can deal with this with a single stroke of the pen, and you know it. Mm-hmm. And stop putting it on Democrats, please. I mean, we don't have time for that. And by the way, while all this is going on, there are children literally crying and very upset, and it's not exaggerated. And if it is exaggerated, let the media come into all of these facilities. And let's say, and then the other thing is, I was about to say, is that the Republicans have not lifted one finger to help us try to find out this information that we're looking for. And so they become aiders and abettors. And so hopefully we will get past this. But I would say to America, and speaking to Americans, don't let this happen. Don't happen, and because at the rate we're going, your children will not even know a democracy. They will not even be able to identify with this country because the democracy will be so watered down.
Congressman, it's Willie Geist. The president hasn't shown any willingness to budge, as you've heard. In fact, he's dug in harder on this policy. Steve Bannon said in an interview with the Associated Press yesterday, quote, "This is why America elected him. This is not doubling down. It is tripling down." As you know well, there are a couple of bills floating through the House right now, Republican bills. It appears many Republicans disagree with this policy and are willing to do something about it. But then you had Chuck Schumer come out yesterday and say, quote, "Legislation is not the way to go. This is up to the president." Shouldn't Democrats be more open to a legislative fix if it looks like the president won't move on it?
I think that we should do everything in our power. I think we should be, first of all, not taking the weight off of the president as he goes around and tries to blame everybody but himself. So we need to put the pressure there. But I think if there are legislative fixes, we ought to try them. But usually what has been asked is for to address these issues, you got to pay a high price.
Right.
Like paying billions and billions of dollars for a wall that the president said would be paid for by the Mexicans, or curtailing immigrant opportunities of becoming citizens and coming to our country tremendously. I mean, you gotta figure out what the trade-offs are. But we shouldn't even be in a position where we have to talk about trade-offs, because what we're dealing with are moral issues. This is moral. And you know, the thing, Willie, that I'm concerned about is the damage that is being done by President Trump. And I'm sad to say this. to correct the damage won't happen during my lifetime.
So,
And I think people need to understand that. Go ahead.
Right.
So, Congressman,
Agree.
Paul Ryan, you've known him quite a while, Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
Has
Yeah.
your opinion of him changed?
No. As a matter of fact, I did not have a great opinion from him at all. You got to remember, we've been trying to get Paul Ryan to bring a voting rights bill to the floor of the House, and he won't do it. And that goes to fundamental rights of American people, the rights that my mother fought for and my father fought for. And my mother on her dying bed talked about the fact that she hated the idea that she saw her people going backwards. So Ryan, I've not been that impressed. I've not been impressed when he could have stood up to this president. He didn't. And so now he's on his way out, and now he's talking a little bit of stuff. And, you know, that's the other thing that bothers me. When people like Ryan and even my good friend Trey Gowdy says something that you know, is reasonable, the press says, oh, this is wonderful. But that's what they're supposed to do. I mean, come on now. We have moved to a new sense of normal. And that's why the media, I tell the press, every time I meet with the press, I tell them, you have got to get this right. Because people will look at us 200 years from now and say, what did you do? Did you stand by and say nothing? How did Hitler get all the power that he got? Did people just stand by and say nothing and do nothing? Last but not least, let me say this, that Martin Luther King, in one of his speeches, said something that I love. He said, quite often, what happens is that silence becomes betrayal. Silence becomes betrayal. And so I would say to the American people, we cannot be silent. This is not the moment for silence. Do not be silent. Do whatever you have to do. And again, we need to approach this from every single way we can. And I'm sure, I just believe and that we will get through this, but it's going to be tough times.
Silence is betrayal. And Elijah Cummings, thank you so much. It is so great to hear your voice on this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still ahead. So does all of this come down to base politics? The AP reports that the president sees this immigration fight as a winning culture war issue. We'll dig into that. Plus, Scott Pruitt, Betsy DeVos, Jeff Sessions. Besides being in Trump's cabinet, they have something else in common. They were recommended by the Heritage Foundation. We have new reporting on how the conservative think tank is helping staff the Trump administration. Next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.